Good morning, everyone. I hope that you can hear me. This is Karen McBride from the ILA Marketing Forum. You are stuck with me for one more month of Marketing Forum roundtables. I am no longer the manager. I'm pleased to say that Andrea Lublink from the Palatine Public Library will be taking over as the forum manager for the coming year, but Andrea has a very important family commitment today, so she cannot join us. But we're glad to see so many of you, and I think it's going to be a great start to this two-part roundtable that we are doing in July and August, focusing on annual reports and other types of board reports. Those things that I think as creative types, maybe we don't look forward to as much as some of our other work, but that are still so important and so necessary. So I don't want to take up too much of our time. I want to get right to our speakers, but I do also want to welcome two new members to the ILA Marketing Forum leadership team. And they are Jane Ha, who is the content specialist at the Northbrook Public Library, and also Jordan Neal, who is our board liaison. And Jordan is the career librarian at the Champaign Public Library. So welcome to both of them. We're very delighted to have them on board with us and making good things happen for library marketing in the state of Illinois. So we actually have four speakers who will be participating today, and I'll just briefly introduce them, and I'm going to then just turn it over to them. We're going to begin with Chad Comello from the Morton Grove Public Library. Hi, Chad. Always a great contributor to our conversations here. And we have Jody Colo and Mallory Edgar from the Oak Park Public Library, and we're very pleased to have you with us today as well. And finally, I'm sorry to say that Denise Raleigh from the Gail Borden Public Library could not be with us today due to an unfortunate circumstance, but we are delighted to have Laura Espinosa with us from Gail Borden. I've worked with Laura on a few little side projects and she's awesome. So I'm thrilled to be able to cover for Denise today, and we thank you for joining us. And my understanding is you'll be here with us next month too. So just a reminder that this is part one of two sessions. Today we're focusing on sort of the information gathering and the planning part of this process. How do you get material for your annual report? How do you decide what goes in and maybe what doesn't go in? And how do you decide on a format and who gets to contribute? All of those pieces. Next month, we'll get into more of the design aspect and the publishing and distribution aspects. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to Chad, who is our first speaker. So we're going to go with Chad first, and then with Jody and Mallory second, and then Laura to wrap it up. And then what we'll do is, if you wouldn't mind holding your questions until all of those speakers have had a chance to go, and then we'll just open it up to questions via the chat. And I will be monitoring those as well as Tamara from ILA. So that'll give all of the speakers time to present all their material. And then I think you'll find that they're probably going to answer a lot of your questions along the way. Thank you, and take it away, Chad.
Thanks, Karen. I'm Chad, Marketing and Engagement Manager at the Morton Grove Public Library. I think the others are going to be talking about the annual reports, but I'm actually going to be focusing on our monthly reports because we haven't historically done annual reports. So I'm very eager to find out from the other libraries how they do theirs and learn from them so we can start doing them, because I think it is an important thing. From our perspective, doing the monthly reports, and I think there's a list of questions that all of us are going to tackle in some way. So I'll just kind of go through those. We do it every month. It's in the timing of it in terms of gathering the info and getting it out to where they need to go is dependent on the board meetings, because ultimately these are put together for our board. So our board meets the second Thursday of each month. So, after the first of the month, start collecting stats. The managers have a shared spreadsheet. Now it's on Excel Online on SharePoint that we use. So, all kinds of data that is collected in there. So depending on when the board meets, we have a certain deadline of when we need to have those stats gathered, and along with the reports that we put together that I'll discuss in time for our director to compile them and get them out to the board with enough time before the actual meeting. So that deadline is kind of dependent on that. It is primarily digital, although the board members do get a print copy of the final products in their own reports. So the managers of each of our departments are responsible for gathering the data. Some of the data does come up from the staff, so whether it's circulation or ebooks and things that the staff, individual librarians are responsible for, they'll add to the spreadsheet as well. But then culling from that is our manager's responsibility. It is, in terms of what is included and not and what isn't, it is up to the discretion of the manager for each department. I think historically, I think more before I was in my role, each report from the manager tend to get a little longer than I think ideally, which obviously comes from a desire to show off everything your department does, right? Who doesn't want to do that? But it did create a sort of my term of it was like an arms race for showing off to the board, which can certainly spiral into something that kind of and not as ideal. So at some point, I think our director asked to limit to just 2 pages for each one. So that would include a sort of narrative, any sort of narrative they wanted to add, along with any sort of stats as well. Mine tends to just be pretty simple bullet points, just because that's my style, and I think makes it a little easier and skimmable, and just be able to include more. But specifically our youth and adult departments, they have more programs. They tend to have more going on than our other departments. So they will include pictures and a little more narrative, just summarizing the month. But it depends on the department. Some are just a couple bullets long, and just it depends on the department and depends on what's going on. So that just so it's up to the manager's discretion. But I think having the 2-page limit helps, just to keep it short and sweet for that. So it's each manager compiles our reports and then sends them to the director. In terms of how much time goes into it, and I did ask a few of the managers from their perspective, because for me it's about an hour once again all the stats are gathered, and then just culling the bullet points from my employees, things that they want to include. I think all that together is about an hour. So for the other managers said it could take up to 2 hours, depending on what's going on, and for the director too, just putting it all together, making sure everything's formatted correctly, and then merging it all into one for the board. Let's see, I can share. I'd share just so we can see. You can see I think Denise called it the ugly version. So this is just kind of the monthly, Word documents. So nothing super fancy compared to the annual reports that are put together, but it's just so you can see. So ours is actually still called the librarian's report, which I wonder it was, I think, sort of a relic from when we used to just have a head librarian way back in the day, but that's just sort of a remnant of that. Simple intro, kind of summarizing from the director and administration perspective here, and then jumping into the different departments here for adult, some bullet points. I can send a link to our board minutes if you want to explore our other ones. You can do that. Here's mine here again, just simple bullets. And then it's also included after all the departments. Then it gets into this graphical presentation, which I know we'll talk about in the next session. But then here comes the ugly tables again. That again are super nice and nice to have, but obviously not bedtime reading material, or maybe it is bedtime reading material. Maybe it'd be perfect for that. Anyway, yeah. So that's kind of the monthly report process from our perspective. I don't know how it compares to other libraries, but I think the limited to 2 pages and then achieving a same kind of formatting and style was also part of that change, because it seemed like every department had a different font or a different way of titling it, which just drove me crazy. So I'm very glad that we achieved some sort of standardization with that. So so I think that sort of tackled the stuff that I wanted to talk about there. So I can toss it to the next crew.
Hi, I'm Jody, and
And
you see
I'm,
Mallory.
yeah, and I'm Mallory, the manager of data analytics at Oak Park. And Jody, I'm going to share my screen. We've got just a
Perfect.
short little slide set because we're nerds and put them together beforehand. But think we covered all of the questions that were shared with us in advance.
And like Chad mentioned, we also don't call our document an annual report. We're going to talk about what we call our year in review. And
And I'm
so
going to actually drop that. I just dropped the link, Jody, in the chat for everyone to the actual annual.
Oh, cool.
the
Thank you
year
for
in
doing
review.
that.
And then share my screen.
All right. Mallory and I are both working from home today, but we also share an office. So we spend a lot of time together. So yeah, to get started, we thought we'd tell you just a little bit about our library and give you a sense of community use. Oak Parkers love and use their library. Cards don't expire. And the library went fine free back in 2017. In 2018, we did some work to try to figure out how many households and card holders did we actually had cards, and that came out to about 70% at the time. We do monitor on a monthly basis how many of those households are active, and we define active as someone in the household has used their card at least once in the last 12 months. And I think our last round was about half, 50% of our households are active. A lot more data on the slide that you're taking a look at, and just give you a sense of how big we are. And I will say too that probably 80 to 85% of most traffic, circulation, everything is happening at the main library. But Oak Parkers also really love their branch libraries, Mays and Dole. So if you want to move ahead, Mallory. I mentioned we changed a couple of years ago the title of this piece from an annual report to year in review, but we've been online for a long time, online only, and really lucky for us, we've got a very succinct strategic plan, which identifies 4 strategic priorities, and those are engagement, learning, stewardship, and added recently this year, anti-racism. So who we're developing this particular piece for is everybody. But really, we find the people who care the most about it are what we call our stakeholders. So those are kind of, closest to us, people who are watching, keeping an eye on, who we're working with on a daily and weekly basis. And then, believe it or not, the critics, the people who come in and have a lot to say about what we're doing or not doing and how they agree or disagree with it. Lots of times Oak Park has received, the primary criticism on maybe taking new and different approaches about what the true purpose and value of a library is in the community. A couple of years ago, after reading Eric Kleinenberg's book for our one book over the summer, it adopted the phrase social infrastructure in a lot of our internal material and external, and the idea that being able to tell a story around the impact of a library being books and more was really, what we try to do every year with this piece, but also throughout the year. And so Mallory is going to talk a little bit more about that, how we gather information and then throughout the year, and then that's really what's feeding this report. One of the questions that we were asked was, how long does it take and who contributes? So I put stuff on there on the slide. You'll see it really doesn't take 6 months to do this. I will say the bulk of the work is done in January and February. And the last 3 years, we've used Adobe Spark as the software to create this report, and really find that each time we do it, it gets a little bit easier and moves a little bit faster. The contributors let me say that again, contributors are definitely throughout the library. But we do have the benefit of having a 5-person team kind of really do kind of the bulk of the hands-on work. And we're getting input, revisions, specifics from everybody in the library, managers, directors, librarians, and as well as some external partners that we're working with and we try to showcase in the piece.
Great. So Jody referenced this briefly earlier, but we, in our annual reports and in our monthly reports to the Board of Library Trustees and to the public, we're really guided by our strategic plan and the priorities that are outlined in that plan. And so what we have on the screen right now, and I know there's a lot of text and it's small, the intention isn't for you to be able to read everything on it, just to see what it looks like. But this is our library's logic model. And this is intended to give on a single page kind of a high level overview of the work of the library. So what resources we invest, the things that we do, and then what we hope to see as a result of those efforts and those investments. And on the right-hand side, in the impact section, that's where we outline the objectives and the outcomes that we're hoping to see organized under those strategic priorities of engagement, learning, and stewardship. Jody mentioned that just this spring, we have our first anti-racism strategic plan at the library. And so with the adoption of that, we've added anti-racism as a 4th priority. That will be reflected in the updated version of this logic model that we work on later this year as we're updating the strategic plan overall. And so we wanted to share this just because it really is kind of a starting point for us when we're doing all of our reporting, whether it's the monthly reporting we're doing or the year in review at the end of the year, that we kind of start with the strategic plan and those priorities in mind. And we use those to kind of organize our thinking. So we think about what work has been done in service of those priorities, what outputs and outcomes are associated with each of those categories that are notable over the last month or two in the case of monthly reporting, over the last year in the case of our year in review. And then we can brainstorm as a team what sort of makes the cut and doesn't for each of those. And we feel like this is something, as we've transitioned to using this as our organizing framework over the last couple of years, that it's made it smoother, the process smoother for us, because we're using the same sort of framework and approach over and over again. And it's really grounded in our strategic plan. So the other thing that I think helps kind of set us up for success to make it a little bit smoother when we're putting reports together is having tools and processes that are related to data collection and data management in place and happening throughout the year. So it's not that we're every single month or at the end of the year, we're kind of scrambling to figure out what we do and don't have data-wise, what we should include. That stuff is just already happening. So we are Google-based at the Oak Park Public Library, so we make use of a lot of the applications that are available in Google Workspace, specifically Forms, Sheets, and Data Studio. So we use Google Forms both internally and externally. So externally with things like program and event feedback surveys with patrons, and then also internally for staff to be able to document the work that they're doing. So we have, forms related to outreach and resource delivery, for our book bike activities, for program attendance and reflections on programming. And then we also have a form we've had for a little while now that we call Reporting Our Impact, that is exclusively focused to gathering impact stories from all staff. So it's something that's available on our staff intranet. We send out reminders periodically to staff that it's there, and anyone can go in at any time during the year to submit a story, and they'll say this is under engagement or this is under learning or stewardship. And that sort of creates a repository then for us of stories, so the communications team can go in throughout the year to pull from that for social media, for news stories, and also for our reporting. So forms are really important for us. Also sheets for managing and analyzing data that comes in through those forms. We use it also for inputting data that's from different sources, so everything's all in one place. And then also for feeding our dashboards, which leads us into Data Studio, which is a tool that until I came to the Oak Park Library, didn't know that it even existed. And it's really cool. And I think that a lot of people may not know that it exists. But it's a data visualization tool that's part of Google Workspace as well. So we can use that to summarize and visualize our data in dashboards that are ongoing, both internal and external, and in our reports. And we have a couple of dashboards highlighted on the Evaluating Our Impact webpage that we linked to in an earlier slide. And the image on this slide is actually part of one of those dashboards, our core use statistics one that's updated every month and that we share with our board every month. And then another thing that we use, and definitely content from this ended up in the year in review, is that we use Savannah. And so for that, we are using that to gather information directly from our patrons. So we have our Net Promoter Score survey that goes out every Monday to 15% of cardholders that have been active over the last 2 weeks, and we can get some satisfaction data and feedback from them. And then we also do other kind of time-limited surveys using Savannah. And one of those, like last summer, was our customer use survey that we did that was specifically asking folks about their experience with library service during the pandemic. So that's information that is featured in our community satisfaction dashboard that's on that Evaluating Our Impact webpage. And like I said, definitely made it to the year in review as well. So that's just another piece that we feel like kind of sets things up to be smooth by having those tools and processes in place throughout the year.
Thanks, Mallory. We'll wrap it up by saying that impact storytelling is the internal term that we use to really talk about a lot of the qualitative stuff that feeds the year in review and our ongoing promotions throughout the year. I was excited to see when I logged in that the part-time writer editor who's referenced on this slide is on this call. I don't know if Kristen wants to wave to everybody, but Kristen Romanowski is amazing, and we couldn't do all this without her. She interviews people kind of in a journalistic style, whether they're in the library, outside the library, in these, story ideas, pursuing anything that's fitting within meeting the strategic priorities, objectives, or goals. And it's this kind of news feed of impact stories that really helps feed a lot of other things that we do, whether it is stuff on the website, push emails to patrons, pitching, local media, or maybe, library media, board reports, and then of course why we're here today to talk about this year in review. So yeah, couldn't do it without her, couldn't do it without Mallory. It's definitely a team effort. Thank you so much for listening. And Mallory has put on the screen, a couple other URLs and ways to contact us if you have more questions. So thanks.
All right, so I'm Laura, and I am the graphic design supervisor at Gilborden Library. Denise was the one that was going to be doing this presentation, and she's the division chief of the public relations and development, so our marketing departments here. And I'm filling in. I'm going to try to, use Denise's vibe to get what she was trying to say, but I'm not her, so I'm going to try my best. I didn't get time to get a presentation ready, but I will go through some of the questions, and I'm happy to answer as much as I can if I know the answer. So I'll do my best. So for the timetable, we don't have like a set time. We try to collect everything November 1st. The division chiefs will send us the content, and from there we kind of take it over and gather everything, put it in one place. Liz Clements, who's our head of communications and basically our head writer, will go through the entire thing, and she's the one that kind of just gets it like ready for us to start working with. So she'll start grouping things because it's submitted through like the board reports. And so it's very like, this is what this department did, this is what this department did. And she goes through and like groups it so that like two like programmers that are in one department and another are all listed in the same section of our reports. So she does, I think, the heavy lifting of all of that, gathering of all of that. As we see it, there are things that we notice that are missing, or we're like, we would like to see this. So then we'll reach out and say, hey, do you have these like kind of numbers? Do you have these kind of like, what are our top books? Like just going in and asking like what we would like to see to be added, and we'll contact to get more information added to it. As we don't include everything. Obviously, there's no way we could do that. So we have two different versions of the annual report. One is what you said, the ugly report. We have the big report, which is just the everything that's been put together, and that's actually put together by our admin staff. So everything gets directed to them. They put it all together, and that's from there where Liz gets it and does her thing. So that report we pretty much do not touch. And I will share that a little bit just to show what the large report looks like. I have a lot of windows open. So I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but it is a very long and detailed report. So this is where everything is included, and it's pretty much as the department, as the division chiefs submit this. And I think the admin staff is the one that goes through and cleans it up so it all looks consistent and not all different fonts and margin sizes and all of that. But we do include the big charts and everything in this one. And that's different from the other version. That's the one that we take. That's the one we take over, where we grab that and additional content. So like you were saying, the qualitative content, the stuff that is not typically in the reports, we have stories from social media. We have things that people will send us throughout the year. So we're constantly gathering all of those things. And this is the culmination of that, but we definitely do not include everything in there. And our main purpose is for the library customer. So we do take into consideration the board members and other staff and other librarians and other audiences, but our main audience is for the customer, the taxpayer. This is what we did throughout the year, and it's to land the library value. So the library value message that we're always thinking about. That's our number one goal, is to promote that. So this report just highlights that, and every year we have a different theme. So I think the year that the Cubs won the World Series, we had a whole Cubs themed annual report. So that one was kind of fun to look at. But this year, of course, it was COVID, the last one. So we highlight what the customer most likely saw, which was for the most part, I think, the virtual programming. And then they were coming in, going through the drive-through, they were checking out materials. People were receiving things from home. So we were just focusing on the customer. But we tried to include as much as we can without overloading it, because if we could, this would be a very, very long, multiple page PDF that would look really, really pretty, but you're not going to get to the end of it. So we try to strip it down to the least amount of pages, which this one was 24, which it's still kind of a lot of pages, but we do have a lot to say. So we tried to be clear about that. And I'll be talking about the design part of this the next session. So I won't go into detail about that, but Denise told me to mention the big numbers. We purposely make the numbers gigantic so that you can look at that. And that's like, oh, wow, look at that. I had no idea that that's how many visitors came to the Rick Branch. So that's the purpose of that, is to make those numbers stand out. And then the rest are stories. And we highlight, our staff if we can. We have, I think, a page just for the awards, like staff has won awards throughout the year. So yeah, that's this was the 2020 report, but every year we do this, where we have the long report, and then we have what we call the short report, or the highlights. And that one we do print. So we will print out the copies. We do them in-house. We have the PDF, And then we share them all on our annual reports page. We did try Spark one year, and we did not like that we could not print it. So there is an option, I think, to print, and who knows, it might be different now. But the one time we tried it, we tried making the PDF, and it ended up being like 62 pages. So we're like, we're not going to do that anymore. But it would still be nice to go through that and just have the web version and the PDF version. But we focus on the PDF, and if we have time, we'll do something in addition, or a video of the recap of all of that. But yeah, I think that's it. And let me see if there's anything I missed. We highlight positive stories. We try to connect with the customers with anything that has emotion. So like the Betty farewell. Betty was one of our like lifelong librarian staff here. So everybody knew her who came around. So we're like, we have to mention her. We cannot not include her. So we try to yeah, focus on what our customers are looking for. And I guess we'll start the questions.
Yes, thank you all so much. I was like writing notes and looking at things online at the same time. It's like the ultimate multitasker because all your information has been so helpful. So thank you. I'm going to open it up to questions just a moment. We did have a few questions that were submitted to us, and you may have touched on some of this already, but one of them was sort of talking about time management. You know, how much time does a document like this deserve, as the submitters worded it, versus the amount of readership that it may actually get? Do you put a lot of time into it? I certainly, from what I've seen, it looks like you do, but would you all feel comfortable talking about that a little bit?
I'll start. I saw your timetable, Jody, and I think that's very similar to how we do it. Like, it does seem to be stretched through a long period of time. But we're certainly not, that's the only thing we're doing. So it goes up and down throughout that time. The part of the readership, I did look, so we use Yampu to host that, and I'll go into detail on the next one. But I do have some ability to see stats, and just on that PDF version alone on Yampu, 4,700 views since we uploaded it. So we can see how many people are looking at it, and it is a very important document, so we do spend the right amount of time on it.
I would add the same. We try to repurpose it. We don't use it for that one-time March distribution. We try to reuse it in different ways throughout the whole year. And Spark 2 does give you the ability to see how many views have you had. I don't think they're unique views, but you know, it does give you a sense of how many people took a peek at it. And I'd say, yeah, that January, February time is pretty intense, but at the same time, you know, it takes what it takes as long as it takes. And it's a really important piece, you know, because I think now that I'm reflecting on what I shared, I think a third audience that I didn't necessarily call out would be other elected officials, and whether they're local, state, or, you know, we don't send things to our federal elected officials, but I'm wondering if other people do, because I think it's good for advocacy efforts as well.
Okay, I think we're good with that one. A question came in over chat, but I want to read one more off of the list that was submitted first. And that is, I'm going to shorten this up a little bit. I think you addressed some of this, which is about being consistent in the content that you put in there, kind of set an expectation. But I'm going to get to the last line of this question, which is, we seem to sometimes differ between what our director thinks this should be versus how we want to present it. And I wonder if any of you could speak to sort of expectations of others in the organization versus your own expectations as the communications, marketing, and graphic design people.
It is definitely a challenge. We all have, even within our departments or outside, like the division chiefs and everything. So everybody wants their stuff included. And like I think you mentioned in the beginning, having that selection of 2 pages. I don't know if we could do that because of the different departments, but yeah, it is a challenge, but we do run everything by everybody. So it's not like we're just like, okay, you don't get a say in what we're putting in here. So we run everything, the division chiefs, our director gets to see everything at some point. They'll get to send changes and say, no, take this up, add this. And everybody at the end, I don't know if they're 100% happy with it, but everybody is at least, aware of the final product and has had their say in it.
Very similar for Oak Park. But I would say that it's not difficult to get consensus on a higher level because everyone's in agreement on those 3 strategic priorities. And we do the also a theme approach where it's like, we were thinking the theme is going to be this year. And we kind of, sit down and talk with the directors and managers and all at once. So everybody can hear kind of what everybody else is thinking and go through that same process again with the outline so that, it's kind of one of those, like, if we're all in agreement on the structure or the framework, it kind of builds itself in terms of what stands out. So yeah, I feel like I've definitely been in other situations where there maybe hasn't been that internal agreement from the start. But I think with every project that we work on, we try to ask those 2 big questions, what is the goal of this piece and who is the primary audience? Because it's been a big transition to say everyone, because you can't say everyone's the audience for everything. I mean, even though that's technically true, you really want to create whatever you're doing with a specific, person or audience in mind, and put your head in their head and say, well, what do they want to hear about based on their relationship with the library?
That's it. So speaking from, again, the monthly report versus annual report position that, my employees send me stuff of everything they did this month, but they know, and I'm clear that it's not all going in the department report. Just being selective, and that even if stuff doesn't get in there, there are other ways that it can be acknowledged. So, or like we'll get patron comments that, nice things about the library, and maybe 1 or 2 will be featured in the thing that goes to the board, but we also share those and other ones on social media or in other ways. So it's not that if it's not in the report, it didn't happen, right? Even if it feels that way, there's other ways of being able to share all the good stuff that you're doing beyond that.
Great, thank you all. One question that came in, this is kind of more of a distribution question, but I know we can skip ahead to next month for briefly. Linda and Mandy were both asking about mailing, and I assume when you say mailing, we're talking about good old postal mail. We can ask our speakers today. I didn't get the sense that anyone mails a document to residents via the postal service. Is that correct?
We do not.
Okay.
Prior to the pandemic, we mailed 4 times a year. I was looking for it, the link to send it, and I'll find it and put it in the chat. We mailed a 20-page, we called it a magazine that was also written primarily by Kristen, but had a similar approach to how we put together the yearly review. And so it had stories and stats and events that were coming up. We did that instead of a calendar. And we did mail that, and believe it or not, it was super cheap to print, and the postage was, we did bulk rate postage because it wasn't a calendar, so it wasn't time sensitive to do first class. But it wasn't very expensive to do, but the perception of how much it cost was what changed our practice. And it's something we may return to. It was a useful tool for us to do mailings, every household mailing. But the perception of us spending too much money was what kind of, at least during the pandemic, has put that project, the mailing, on hold.
That's a really interesting point about perception. And I know we've run into that in our own community sometimes as well. For the rest of you, I'm going to ask a favor. If any of you do in fact mail your annual report or a similar document to your district residents or your community residents, could you use your reaction button of a thumbs up? And maybe we can see, if you know where that is, there's a little reactions icon and you can give us a thumbs up just so that Linda and Mandy can see that there are others in the group who do use the mail. I'm only seeing one thus far, Melissa. Perhaps Melissa will put you on the spot next month. She's part of the forum. We can put her on the spot. So that's good to know that there are some questions about that and people may be curious.
If you have 2 seconds, I can just say what we do.
Absolutely. Go for it.
So our report is very small. It actually started, I think 4 years ago as a 1-page infographic. And then now it's developed to like a 4-page spread. It's basically like 11 by 17 folded in half. We actually, because our fiscal year ends June 30th, we always include it in our winter newsletter. So we bumped from 24 pages to 28 pages and we put it right in the middle. And that's like just the one issue where we, put it in there. It has a cover. It has 2 pages of like our big highlights for the year. And then the back is still like an infographic of those kind of big stats and numbers that we want to report. And so then, that's how we quote unquote mail it out because we're mailing the newsletter. And then otherwise we just print separate copies that we just keep in the building and things like that so that it can also stand alone.
Great, thank you. That was very helpful.
We do also just include, or at least last year, we had an infographic that is included in our regular bi-monthly newsletter. However, it timed out to close enough to the new year. So that's, I think, a way, if you don't want to have to do an extra mailing, just making room for that, I think it makes sense.
Great, thank you. We had another question come in from Joy, and she said, library staff are usually busy and documenting tends to be the first thing to fall by the wayside. I find that very interesting. I'll say why in a minute. For those of you gathering staff content throughout the year via passive forms, do you need to prompt and remind coworkers to fill them out? I'm interested only because at our place, we just have a system that we call soft comments, and it's a Google form and it goes into a spreadsheet. And our frontline staff seem to really love that. I mean, like, I'm stunned when I get it every month because just like, wham, it's loaded with comments and they're both positive and negative. But others, share your experiences.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit as the data person. So that is 100% to Joy's comment about how it's easy for that to be something that falls by the wayside. And I think, like at any workplace, there's folks are on a spectrum, right? Like some folks are really like immediately after a program is done, they're getting, certain forms submitted and things like that. And others are maybe waiting and it's easier to do all of that. They've maybe taken notes, but to do the actual documentation, it's easier to do that at the end of the month. And so I've just gotten into a practice that there is an email that goes out on the last day of every month to relevant folks that says, hey, this is your friendly reminder that these are forms that need to be filled out if you have anything to document from the last month. And then we have a staff intranet where all of those forms are linked, but I also have a document that I link to in that has a table that breaks down, okay, if it's for programs, you need to fill out this and this, and there's direct links to those forms just to make it easier for folks. But have found that has been helpful because we were seeing a little bit of a dip in terms of things not getting documented as sort of promptly at the end of every month. So started to put that into place and found that that's really helped with just kind of an extra nudge to folks. And then I think the other thing that I would say too is that it's helpful. I mean, obviously everybody can get busy during a particular month and there may be more behind than they were in previous ones. But I think also just being clear about the why behind the documentation ends up being helpful. Like if folks understand what this is being used for, why it's important, I think that it doesn't then just feel like this other thing that you have to check off a to-do list, and I think that there have been some cases too where the data visualization piece and dashboards has been really useful in emphasizing that, because if people can see, not just like a spreadsheet or see, oh, I filled out this form and I got the email that says that I filled out the form, but they can see the story that it tells. I think it gets people kind of more excited maybe about data, not everyone, but I think that piece is important too for folks to be kind of on time and prioritizing the data entry piece.
I have a question sort of relating to that. Do you feel comfortable with ours, with these soft comments that we collect? We don't have the customer's name most of the time or any identifying, which I think is fine, but do you feel like it's okay to put those quotes or those comments out there for the public in a report or on a social media graphic or anything? Is there anything weird about that? I'm always afraid, like, does it look like I've manufactured this really positive comment?
It is nice because we do, when we do get comments, we put them in a graphic to share on social and elsewhere. And we usually do use the just their first name because it helps to make it a little more concrete. And if once in a while we do get handwritten anonymous notes, we'll just say anonymous. That's just how it goes. But yeah, we do at least try to use the first name for that.
I think it's fine to include them. They're most of the time they are already visible on Facebook or Google comments or wherever people are messaging. So if somebody really wanted to, they could probably find where the original was submitted. So yeah, we're okay putting that. I don't know if you saw that in the when I was flipping through it, but we did during COVID, we had a lot of comments of people looking at our videos from far away. So we grabbed this little chart and just collected the, hi, I'm from Seattle or whatever. So it was really nice being able to do that in the annual report.
And we did the same. We run a survey, an online survey that comes, and there's, you definitely get typed in feedback from that. And we used a lot of that in not only from the patron survey, but from the forums that Mallory mentioned. So yeah, we're okay with first name or anonymous or a patron or a program attendee, like definitely use them all over.
Thank you. That's helpful. Anyone else have a question? You can either shout it out or you can put it in the chat. Either one is fine. I also suspect that some people are going to watch this later. Just so you know, we make the videos available to people who register. So there may be questions that then come up later and we'll get them to you. Anyone else? Tamara, what do you think? Are we ready to wrap it up for today?
Yes, we are.
All right. All right, well, thank you all so much. Thank you to our 4 presenters. Like I said, I've got a page full of notes here already, so I'm really excited. The annual report is not one of my favorite things. I mean, it's a love-hate relationship. I'm going to put it that way. I want to do a good job, but I sometimes feel like I lack the tools. Chris has we've got several nice thank yous to you in the chat, so please make sure you soak up the love down there today. So thank you for being here. We'll see you again next month. Don't forget to watch for the recordings too, because I know I like to go back sometimes and especially take a look at your slides. Thanks for being so thorough and thoughtful and with everything that you presented to us today. Everybody have a great weekend. Take care, and we'll get together next month.